Me again, time for another boring old fat whiny woman, bonbon eating, triple chin wearing bad hair doing obligation video time. I've got a problem. Well, I got a couple of problems. But one in particular, which I just can't wrap my little noodle bucket around. Having lots of difficulty with this one. What is it? Okay, you got some people. Let me set this up. You got a lot of women saying they are Mary Magdalene and they are going to marry Christ. They're going to be whisked up in the clouds and everybody's going to see that they're going to marry Jesus. So you got that. A lot of these women saying they're Mary Magdalene. Now, nowhere in Scripture does it say Christ is married. In fact, you got Christ saying that he is God, like Philippians 2 and 6, where Paul, talking about Christ, said Christ thought it not robbery when he was in the form of God to be equal with God. And then he made himself lower and took on the form of a man and became obedient unto death of crucifixion. That's pretty crystal about Christ being God. You also got stuff like, was it John 17, where Christ asked God to restore him to his former glory. And then you got verses like John 8, where he's talking with the Pharisees saying that, have you met Abraham? I have. And they're like, you're not even 50 years old. Have you met him? He said, before Abraham was, I am. That was the whole reason they wanted Christ crucified, was because of the blasphemy, saying he was equal with God, or saying he was God. So you got these women who are saying that they are going to be married. And why do I mention about Christ being God? Well, the potter is not going to fashion a piece of clay and marry it. I mean, it's just not going to happen. Scripture does not have Christ being married to a singular woman. Christ is married to the church. You see this when you read Paul in Ephesians. You see this, you see an exact description of the bride if you go to Revelation 21. And unless a woman is alive today with 12 gates born on her, I don't believe you. Just want to point that out. So they got these women who are saying that they're going to marry Christ. Now, some of these women, let's whittle that away. Some of these women get around this by saying, well, Christ is not God. He's not God. No. He's a messenger or a prophet. So they take away Christ's deity. They got him down to being a messenger or a prophet. And then you got even more, then you can whittle that away a little bit more, because you got women who say they're Mary Magdalene. And okay, all right, now here's I have a stumbling looking at this doctrine. They think they're Mary Magdalene married to Christ, even though Scripture, like I said, does not mention God marrying clay. Nowhere. So they whittle that way. But how are they Mary Magdalene now when there's no such thing as a reincarnation? It's appointed for men to die once, not multiple times. You got two men in history. You got Enoch and Elijah who did not die. You got that, right? And then the one person says, well, that happens because you see with John the Baptist. Well, it was Elijah. However you want to pronounce it, it's pronounced both ways. It don't matter. So they use that as saying everybody gets reincarnated, even though with Elijah it was very specific, because that was 420 plus years after the last prophet, and God was silent until Christ was to come. He was making a way for Christ. So that was important. Also, he didn't die before. So how can somebody who once, it says you once die, right? So I can kind of, I get it with that, even though John the Baptist said, I'm not Elias. And then Christ, he's got the spirit of Elias. So, okay. But you got that to die once. Ooh. So with Elias, you can kindly get that. You can kindly get that with that. But Mary Magdalene died. She has already died once. So how is she going to die again? Oh, so maybe she's reincarnate now, but she won't die. She won't die. Is that it? Hey, I'm getting a light bulb. Is that it? Answer me now. Is this because you're born Mary Magdalene and then you won't die because you're going to be whisked up into heaven, right? Is that it? I want to know the answer to that one because that has something to do with what I'm going to ask later. Okay, to recap. Group of women saying they're Mary Magdalene, they're going to marry Christ up in the heavens. And then you can whittle off some of those because some of them say that Christ is not God. And then you can whittle down a little bit more about that reincarnation thing. And then you can whittle it down even more than that with, I'm sure there's more than one. I'm positive. You got people saying that these Mary Magdalene saying that you're under the old law. Now here's where it gets crazy. Now let's focus on that small section of Mary Magdalenes who say you're under the old law and Christ came and was only a messenger and you're in a transition period until you're under the new covenant with the millennial kingdom. And so you got this big, huge, and then millennial kingdom and all this. And this is even though you've got stuff like Hebrews 8. Matter of fact, let's just look at that. Let me type that up. Let me pull that up. If you go to Hebrews 8 and 13, in that he saith, a new covenant, he had made the first oath. He made the first oath, so the first is oath. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. Now, they will argue that ready to vanish and go away, when you're ready to go away, that means 2,000 years later, you're going to be in these little death throes. Ain't that fun? 2,000 years in these little death throes. That's longer than Israel was ever a nation. But you're in these death throes for 2,000 years, this 2,000 year transition period. Now, this is not anything new because you have Baptists that believe the same thing, that Christ come for to make his kingdom, but he failed. God's a big old failure. So he decided to come up with plan B. What a not so nice doctrine is that? Whew, almost let a bad one slip. But anyway, let's get back on target. So we're under the old law. So let's recap once again. You got a Mary Magdalene who says she's reincarnated and we're under the old law in a transitional period. And let's see, is there anything else that's important on this? I guess that's about it for now. But here's the crazy part. Now, when I look at this through that doctrine, through that doctrinal lens, how can this actually happen? Here is the problem I'm having with this. Mary Magdalene, who is a whore, who died and reincarnated, and you're under the old law, but you're going to marry Mary Magdalene anyway. But if you're reincarnated, but you're only to die once, that means you got to be whisked up in heaven and marry them now, right? Right now, not later when you get another body, right? Because there's There's marriage when you're in heaven. There's no such thing as marriage. So it's got to be now in this millennial kingdom now with this body, right? The body where you have been married and have a child. Okay, so there's the groundwork. And we're going to look at this through the old law. And we got a problem with this. If we go to Hebrews 7, and you look, this is once again talking about by so much Jesus was made surely of a better testament, something new. But you say we're under the old law because the other one is floundering around for 2,000 years and refuses to die, even though that's longer than Israel was ever a nation. But here's where we got a problem. Christ is, but this, all right, let me start at 22. You can read the whole chapter. It don't matter. By so much Jesus was made surely of a better testament, and they truly were many priests, because they were not suffered to continue by reason of death. But this man, because he continueth forever, talking about Christ, has an unchangeable priesthood. Wherefore he is able also to save them to the uttermost that come unto God by him, seeing that ever liveth to make insurrection for them. For so much a high priest become us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and made higher than the heavens. So Christ is our high priest. And if you read, let's just continue. Who needeth not daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins, and then for the people's? For this he did once, and he offered up himself. Some people want to think that the temples are coming back, but when you read Old Testament in chronological order, that was talking about after Babylon. It wasn't talking about in the future. That's because it says right here, there are no more sacrifices. There are no more sacrifices. Christ did it. He did away with it. For the law maketh them high priests which have infirmity, but the word of the oath, which was since the law, maketh the Son, who was consecrated forevermore. So you got Christ being the high priest. He's actually, if you read the whole chapter on Hebrews 7, he is a high priest after the order of Melchisedec. And they actually say, for this to happen, there has to be a change in the law. So, but you don't believe that. You think we're under the old law. We're under the old law. So you don't believe in that because that old law is floundering, right? Okay, now here's where it gets crazy, where I just cannot, for the life of me, see how Mary Magdalene marries a high priest. If you go back to old law, and you go back to Leviticus, and let's start at 21. And the Lord said unto Moses, speak unto the priests, the sons of Aaron. See, now we got a problem right there, because Christ wasn't born from the sons of Aaron. And you cannot be born into two tribes. I don't know why you've got that up. That is absolutely crazy. You could only be born into one. You could be married into another, but you're only born into one. Let's continue. And the Lord said to Moses, speak unto the priests and sons of Aaron, and say unto them, there shall none be defiled for the dead among his people. Now, this is where he's saying, but for his kin, that this is actually meaning the high priest cannot be defiled. And these are the ways he cannot be defiled. What we're covering is they cannot be defiled for the dead, except this is the only reason that they should mess with anybody of the dead. But for his kin that is near to him, that is, for his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, and his brother, and for his sister who is a virgin, that is nigh unto him, and hath no husband, for her may he be defiled. Why is that important? Well, this is how you get into another tribe. If you are a woman, you are born under your father's tribe. And then when you're married, you're in your husband's tribe. This is important because of the way the laws are written about, the feasts, which are so important, like Jubilee, where the land is put back into the tribes, the hands of the tribe, which we cannot follow anymore because those records, those ancestral records, are gone in 70 AD. No Jew alive today can prove they're Jewish. And before you say DNA, there is a reason Israel will not let the Jewish people be DNA tested. Just want to point that out. Anyway, let's continue. But he shall not defile himself, being a chief among his people, to profane himself. Now, this is also important. This is what a high priest cannot do. He shall not make baldness upon their heads. They can't shave all their hair off. They can't do that. They can't make baldness upon. Neither shall they shave off the corner of their beard, or make any cuttings in their flesh. They can't do it. Now here is another. Let's continue. Here's another. For they shall be holy unto God, and not profane the name of their God, for the offerings of the Lord made by fire, and the bread of their God they do offer. Therefore they shall be holy. Now, that's that. No, but you also have another. You got another law for high priest, which Christ is. If you go back to Hebrews 7, Christ is the high priest, not will be in a transitional period once it's over. Christ is now the high priest, which makes intercession for us to God. He is like our attorney. That's what a high priest does, make intercession. So he is the high priest now, today, not later, not after transition. You can read that in Hebrews 7. But this one, if you're wanting this old law to stand, here's where I have a problem. They shall, I'm at 7 by the way, Leviticus 21 and 7. They shall not take a wife that is a whore or profane. Neither shall they take a woman put away by her husband, for he is holy unto his God. The woman has to be a virgin. Got that? Not a divorced woman. So how is Mary Magdalene going to marry Christ? She can't, because she's a whore. They say she's a whore in Scripture. Okay, so they get around this by saying, well, she died and I'm reincarnated with a new body. But if that body has been defiled, marriage and children, that you are not a virgin again. And even especially under old law, you cannot be a virgin again. Period. It don't matter how long you went without sex. It don't matter. Have you been married before? Can't happen. It just can't happen. Just cannot happen. If you want the whole of the old law, you got to take the whole of the old law. So how does this happen? But when they get their new body is not made for marriage. So it can't be then. So, darn it. How can a woman who's divorced with a child be a virgin who can marry a high priest, which Christ is, a high priest? Answer me that one. It can't. And the only reason, I'm going to tell you this, people, the only reason I'm pointing this out is not to be a butthole. I don't want to be a butthole. I don't want this information taken to go over there and being a butthole to other people. No. I have said this once before. I do believe that some people are out of the way people. And that being said, we're not to be asses. However, I'm hoping, one, to get an answer for this. If you got an answer, I really don't think you got an answer to that one. But I do hope this shakes your mind where you're able to go back to Scripture, if anything, to look for an answer, and two, hopefully it rattles your mind to where you can get out of that understanding that you have. Because Christ is a high priest, and priests cannot marry whores. Can prophets marry whores? Yeah, a prophet can marry a whore. Um, you see Gomer, you see the thing with Gomer, and the whole thing with that, the prophet had to marry a whore, and one of the kids wasn't even his, and the whore was always running off after other men and whatnot, and it was a parallel about God trying to get his wife back. The prophet had to take his kids and the kid that wasn't his and have him run after his mom and say, you need to come back to your husband. And that's parallel with what happened with God. And of course you see this in other places too. You see a prophet who was told he couldn't mourn the death of his wife. And that was when Israel was dead to God. It was parallel. So prophet can, but Christ isn't just a prophet. He is our high priest. He is, not will be, not later down, not when the old law vanishes and waxes cold. He is our high priest. So how does that work exactly? How can a woman who has been divorced with child be able to, because it says the high priest has to marry a virgin and not a woman who's been married. It has to be a virgin. So Mary Magdalene was not a virgin. But even then, like I said, you're all right, so she dies and gets reincarnated into a new body, but then you're married with a child and you don't get your virginity back. And it even says right there that if they've been married before, a high priest cannot marry a woman who's been divorced because it'll defile him. So if the old law's still standing, how's that work out? Just out of curiosity. Anyway, folks, I just want to point that out. And as always, please read that scripture and have a fantastic day.